Hey everyone, welcome to the Early Career Podcast. My name is Priyanka Mankali, your host and friend, and welcome to this guest episode where I'm introducing a very special guest. Claire, Josie, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Hi there.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I know we've been trying to set this up for quite some time. So thank you so much for being here. I know it's also like the evening time for you, so
No
multiple
problem.
reasons. Yeah. How are you doing? How's your day been?
It's been crazy busy as always, but that's a good problem to have, I suppose. So, yeah,
Yeah,
looking forward to
awesome,
this.
awesome. Before we get started, I actually wanted to kick this off by sharing with everybody how we actually met and how we came to this point, right?
Mhm.
Because I think that's really important because, throughout the podcast and as part of how many people I mentor, I keep telling people about how to build strong connections and how to build strong networks and mentors through that process and how it's going to help them in their career, right? And you don't know how, you don't know when, but you just know, you just believe that it will. But sometimes people find it hard to believe me. They're like, oh, try talking to someone and it didn't work out, or and so this podcast and you being here is kind of a testament to how we started off and how we continued our friendship through, even if it is in some sort of like a passive way where we met through conferences and things like that. We still found each other in the conferences and we kind of like stuck around, and then that, one thing led to another. You being from customer as part of my journey with AWS, and from there us being sort of partners building the connected aviation sort of strategy, all the way to like being friends, and then now here on this platform. So I wanted to share that with everybody, that Claire's someone I knew through someone who was my customer, then my partner, and then my friend, and then now we decided to do a podcast together. And the other reason why I feel like I really wanted to do something with you is because you're one of those very empathetic, very caring, warm leaders that I've come across, and
Thank
that's why I'm
you.
always kind of like sticking around you. And even like this year, because we didn't meet any conference at our yearly conferences, I'm like, okay, I need to find some way to connect with Claire back.
Yeah, that's always great to chat to you. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So, something that as I was kind of building the script for this podcast, I was like, what are some really important questions I should be asking Claire that other people might want me to ask you? And something that immediately came to mind is, you being a senior director at Rave, such a big aerospace company. People who are in their 20s and 30s and for you never, I mean, age really doesn't matter in this context, but usually people are afraid to reach out to someone like you
Oh,
because
gosh.
you're in a higher position and in a high rank, right? The reason I found this out is because I don't know I don't know why I do this, but I just like randomly reach out to, like, people from different um, positions, across different sectors. And like even within AWS, I just reached out to like one of our VPs, and I just told her, hey, I just want to have a chat with you. And when I told my other colleagues, they were like, oh my God, what are you going to do? What are you going to talk to someone at that level? Like, make sure you're prepared and, all these things. And I was like, I mean, I trust myself with how I can talk and how I can conduct or carry the conversation. But I wanted to like kind of use this space to, first of all, break the ice for other people to be able to reach out to someone like you, and that is
Mm.
not scary. So what are your thoughts on like people reaching out to you, and how do you perceive that? Should people reach out to you to have a conversation, to get to know you and for you to get to know them?
Absolutely. Yeah, I really think building a network, building relationships with people that you trust and respect, I think that's hugely important. And I don't think people should be intimidated to do that. I've done it in the past, and it can be a little bit strange breaking that ice to begin with. But in my experience, most people are very happy to help. I think it's quite flattering actually to think that you're not just executing on your role and delivering strategically for your company, but you're delivering value to your friends and colleagues and partners and suppliers in a way that actually is really building them up as well. I think that's a really important part of any career and just life generally, right? That's what it's all about. We all rise to the top together.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on in saying that even people like you feel good when you're helping other people, right?
Mhm.
And but sometimes people who are like, let's say in their early career in their 20s, they feel like, oh my god, I don't want to bother someone at that level, right? Like they think that they're going to be a bother. Literally, someone told me that today, that, oh, I don't want to reach out to Priyanka because like I wasn't sure like if I should, or like I don't want to bother you. And I tell people, hey, bother people. If you don't bother people, you're not going to get opportunities that like someone else might get, because they are taking that time to like bother someone, right?
Yeah,
So
that's
what
absolutely true. I've
yeah.
had instances where an intern, as an example, who didn't even work directly with me or my team, at the end of their internship said, can I get just half an hour to grab a coffee with you and just kind of pick your brains a bit? And of course I found time, because I think it's just really important that somebody feels encouraged and motivated. And that was somebody who actually does now work with us, and we have a great working relationship. And I just see a spark in them, that there's an enthusiasm and an energy and a determination to succeed, even if at that time it didn't appear that success would mean landing a role with this company particularly, although in fact they did. um, it made me really see this person has drive, and I really admire that. I've also had situations where, I was in two minds about who I might award a particular job to, and it's the person who picked up the phone and really talked to me about why they wanted it. They followed
uh,
up after the interview, and I thought, this person's really engaged, and that's worth its weight in gold. So yeah, reach out, absolutely.
Wow, that's amazing. You know what? I think you touched on something that was a part of my the last podcast episode, which was about networking and how to not keep it transactional, right? Because I think what happens is a lot of times people will have one conversation, and in that first conversation, they'll ask for something instead of showing the other person who they actually are,
Hmm.
right? So what you're saying is that you found drive, you saw curiosity, you saw passion, and those are all things that can't be said. They have to be shown, right?
Right.
And you saw them,
Yeah.
and then eventually that kind of ended up being a scenario where they got an opportunity to work with you, right? So yeah, and so this is for everybody hearing that, like, see, you have to find a way to expose yourself and talk to people and get to and show them who you really are, so that you're not just asking something and sounding transactional. Because I think that's like my biggest I think it's one of the biggest challenges for people, because when you're like, let's say when you're desperate to get a job, right? Your desperate energy kind of shows up in ways where the other person or people just generally don't want to help someone who's just so who's not able to like create a conversation, create a relationship, create a bond.
Mm.
And so I always tell people to like start creating those networks before they ever need them.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's really important. Absolutely. And I think when you have that, the relationship where it's not, as you said, just transactional, there's something in that exchange, just a melting pot of ideas, just a chemistry of, an energy of ideas that are exchanged. That's where the alchemy is. So maybe if there wasn't an opportunity that already existed, maybe that's the naissance of something that actually could become something pretty cool, because you're sparking off at each other with ideas of where something could go. I think you can create an opportunity that way. Um, yeah, I think absolutely people should be reaching out, talking about their desires, their ambitions, their drive, but also learning from people, and just, going away with a few things to mull over, that, well, yeah, maybe this could become something else. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, and you're right, and that's where like the some of the best business ideas and partnerships and things like that came from, right? It just kind of natural conversation that sparked some idea, and then I think it's the same for me. Like it just, the reason I know the people that I know is because I just would like kind of just talk to people and get to know them and get to know their stories. And sometimes you won't believe it. Like for example, I'm not even like someone who's from, who studied aeronautics and things like that, but I've got gathered so many tidbits from different people about their perspectives on how they view things and strategy and how connected aircraft is going to change in the next few years. And then that kind of informed my opinion. And then I actually became more knowledgeable. And I came across as someone who had this had this sort of spectrum of knowledge and something I can use to have conversations with other people.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. I think listening as a skill is horribly underrated. Yeah, I think if you're reaching out to somebody to grab that coffee, to have 15 minutes just to get to know them a little bit, absolutely prepare, of course, have some ideas of things you'd like to talk to, find out a little bit about them and their background, but also don't just be on broadcast. This was not a performance. You really want to kind of soak up all the opportunity and hear what they have to say and their views of things and take some ideas away to think about. Listening is so underrated as a communication skill.
Absolutely. So how would you want then someone to reach out to you? Because, people are hesitant. They think that someone like you might, judge them, or if they don't have enough of like an agenda or something, that you might think, well, someone in your position might think that, oh, this person is unprepared. So then a lot of times people don't reach out because they're like scared that they might be judged because they are not prepared enough to have a conversation with someone like you.
Probably LinkedIn is a great tool. And I think, if somebody was to shoot me a message and say, hey, I've looked at your profile, there's some really interesting things in there that I'd love to learn more about, some areas that I'm interested in getting into. Could you spare me, 15, 20 minutes just to have a virtual coffee and a chat online, whenever works for you? I probably would be really curious about that person. I think, oh, I wonder how I can help them. Yeah, I probably would respond.
Mm.
Yeah, that's probably a good way to do it.
Interesting. Okay. Well, this was a great start. Let's switch gears a little bit, Claire, and talk about, leadership and, your journey a little bit because I mean, how was it like when you start off, in your career as a woman? And I'm sure it was at least now I think there's relatively more women. In aviation, I think it's still less compared to tech.
Mhm.
Because when I would go to those conferences, I'd be like, it's just me and you. Where are the other women?
Right. Yeah.
So how was it like when you started your career as a woman, and then also how did you have to transition into believing that you are a leader over, your 20s, 30s, 40s, and so
So
on?
when I started work, it was a fairly tactical role, an operational role supporting a sales executive. I was in the media sector and it was a sales role, business to business, very much sort of slow burn, relationship building, that sort of high EQ ability to read the room, to get to know a person, to establish trust. I think those are all things that probably lend themselves more to the way a woman works, typically, in my experience. And so that was a great way to start. Um, I found very quickly that it was an extremely busy role and that I could really make it my own if I was prepared to take the initiative. So I think, establishing, first of all, an understanding of the role, an understanding of the risks and vulnerabilities. If I was to take the initiative and do something without guidance, okay, what was the cost really, whether it was financial or strategic or whatever. But understanding those things, I started to get a little bit braver. And I had a fantastic female boss who was very empowering. And I pretty quickly moved up to more senior roles where I had more responsibility. And probably within maybe 3 years, I shared staff with a couple of other people, and within probably 5 years, then I was running a team. So it was fairly quick for me, but I think the big thing was learning more about not just my tactical role in my silo, but learning more about the business overall, learning about how I could positively impact the business and joining the dots, just understanding that broader context of what the business was about, understanding who to go to get things done, and understanding really, and I think this is probably something that I've taken from everybody that I've worked with, I've taken from my upbringing. You should always be prepared to do whatever it is you're asking somebody else to do. You don't necessarily need to be the expert, and I think the higher you get in the ranks, the less likely it is you're going to be an expert. But you should really be a team player. You should lead by example, and I think those are the things that have got me to where I am now, probably.
I see. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think what you said about also understanding the business context of things, I think, it's a lot. I think a lot of people don't think that that is important. And so, but that's where the failure is, right? Where you
Hmm.
are not understanding why you're building something. You know what you're building, but you don't know why you're building it and who is it benefiting, right?
Right.
So that's a really good point about always focusing on the business impact and also like looking at things from not just technology standpoint but from a use case standpoint. Because when you look at a use case, then you understand who the persona is, who's your customer, and why are you building this, and how is it benefiting your customer and their customer and things like that.
Yeah. I think if you can understand the end goal, somebody might ask a very straightforward question, can this be done, XYZ? And perhaps from a technical perspective, it can't be. But when you understand what it is that they're trying to achieve for their end user, Well, maybe there are different ways of looking at it. But you have to be able to understand not just the technology, but also how to pull on different resources to get that thing done. It's not just about answering the immediate question, but it's about understanding the context and what value it is that your customer wants to give to their end user.
Right. That makes sense. What do you do then when, let's say, you're in a situation where you don't know something? How do you deal with those scenarios where you're expected to know something, but maybe you just don't have enough information?
I think when I was younger, I was probably a little intimidated sometimes to say, I don't know, you know?
Yeah,
I very quickly got
we
over
all
that.
are. Yeah,
It leads to it's just disastrous. You have to be humble enough to say, "I don't know. I want to learn. Show me how." So, yeah, I'm very comfortable asking the questions. I'm not an especially technical person, but I'm in a reasonably somewhat technical role, and I probably have enough information to know what I don't know. I know who to go to fill those gaps. I understand the bigger picture, and that's really because I've been prepared to just ask the questions, raise my hand. I'm not an engineer. There are things that I'm not a software developer. There are things that are totally beyond me, but I know the questions to ask and I know who to go to. And that I think is really key. So yeah, never be shy about saying, I don't know. I need to know. Can you help me figure it out?
absolutely. And I think it's better to and this is what they trained us when we started off as a solutions architect at AWS. Well, 9 years back is it's better to say you don't know than giving a answer that is half accurate, right? Because you don't want to mislead someone and then that you lose trust from
Yeah.
giving half of an answer, which may or may not be right. It could be right, but it could also be wrong.
Hmm.
And then correcting that wrong is worse than saying you don't know, I'll get back to you, and actually getting back to them,
Yes,
right?
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. There are some things that are very difficult to undo.
Yeah, like trust, right? Yeah. So, you mentioned about how in your 20s, you were just like all of us were intimidated by not, by saying you don't know and things like that, right? And I'm sure everyone went through stages of self-doubt and imposter syndrome.
Hmm.
So, do you think that that ever goes away, or you just kind of like learn to deal with it? Because I'm assuming at every level there's something you don't know and something that's challenging, right?
Yeah. I think that there will always be, and honestly, wouldn't life be boring if there wasn't? If we all knew all the answers and it was just like a sausage factory that were just churning stuff out so predictably, that maintaining that curiosity and being willing to learn actually makes life really interesting. So yeah, there are always going to be situations where you feel, oh, am I the right person to be handling this or to be asked about this? And I think for myself, at least, I've come to the conclusion that people aren't coming to me because I have the answers. I think people come to me because I'm pretty good at having the essence of a problem kind of percolate to the top, to just letting the noise drop away and seeing it very clearly, and then understanding the knowledge that we have and the gaps that we have and chasing that down. I think if you can take a complex problem and make it much simpler so that the rest of your audience can understand it and really grasp what it is that is the end game. What does your customer really need? What is the why? Then I think you're probably going to be in a great position to be a leader. And yes, you will always have instances when you go into a meeting and you don't know what you don't know and you're kind of floundering a bit. There are going to be situations where people around the table are all looking at each other thinking, oh, we've never done this before. And that's fine. It just means there are no wrong answers. What we're going to do is brainstorm together and figure it out.
Right. So you're saying so how, I mean, how do people then learn to manage self-doubt without letting it affect their mental health too much?
That's a really tricky one. And I think these days mental health is a real challenge for many people, professionally, personally. I think some of the ways we work today, remotely and so on, it really doesn't help. I think getting over those challenges, a lot of it is about surrounding yourself with good people, people who will give you positive, constructive feedback, honest feedback, being prepared to take that feedback and not be defensive about it. I think that's how you start to really say, okay, these actually were things that I achieved and they went really well. I know I can do this. Even when you're faced with a new challenge. Well, that was new once before. I had a friend of mine who was applying to join the police. She had to jump over a 6-foot wall.
Oh my God.
And she was just a running pace with no props or anything. And she was just really struggling with it. And I turned to her and I said, so I have a 5-foot wall in the garden. And did you go over that the first time with no issues? And she's like, well, oh, yeah. you're gonna figure out a way, and you will be successful, and look back on your past achievements with a degree of pride and realize that you got over that 5-foot wall. Now you're gonna get over a 6-foot wall, and it's gonna be fine.
So you just believe in yourself,
I
right?
think you have to. I think you have to. If you are either in a leadership position or aspire to be in a leadership position, you have to have that drive, that willingness to succeed, and that ability to be humble and accept that sometimes, that success won't come easily. There will be some scraped knees and you will have some problems and you will learn from that. If you're not prepared to take those failures, if you like to call it that, then okay, maybe you shouldn't be going for a leadership role. But I think it's part of growing, it's part of learning. That's how you build a foundation of self-belief.
So it's okay to make mistakes and
Yeah,
grow.
I think as long as you're learning from them, absolutely. I think it's, when you make a mistake several times and it's the same thing, well, you kind of need to question your sanity a little bit. But yeah, I think learning from that experience, it can be difficult to do, particularly, if you're feeling a little on the defensive and well, there are other people or other situations that played into it. That's the reality. Learn from it.
That makes it. Yeah, I think we are very overly self-critical sometimes.
Mhm.
And I've seen this a lot in women, particularly, where they think that everything is their fault, and somehow they've screwed everything up. And when you actually hear it out, what what happened, it would be something very small. Like I try to give myself as well the grace to be able to make mistakes, and I try to give myself the ability to forgive myself, because I think you have to forgive yourself, right? Because you
Mm.
can't just be so critical, because in the end then you will lose your health, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think everybody has self-doubt. I don't think it's just women in leadership. I think everybody at some point goes through that. I do think that there's a behavior that we tend towards more so than men, and that is to placate or appease or not have raised voices or not be as forceful as perhaps we might need to be. Sometimes you'll find yourself in a room with some fairly bombastic personalities, and you're not going to be able to just appease or placate or have a smaller voice heard. Sometimes you're gonna have to get loud, and that's okay.
That's You touched on a really good point about, kind of being assertive and stating speaking up and stating your point and having a voice, really, right? And I think, because when even like 9 years back, when I started off my career at AWS, I was in the US federal civilian team, and so all of my customers were the US federal customers, and they were all mostly, you know men. And I would be like the youngest. Like I would be like I was like a 25-year-old girl walking into a room full of like, men who are twice my age, and I'm like the only woman. And I would be like, okay, I wasn't sure how I should behave, or like who I should even be. You start questioning things, especially when you don't see others like yourself. And I had to really learn to have a voice of my own. But you know what? That came from me feeling like people were either not respecting me enough, or speaking over me, or underestimating my capabilities. And that's when I started to realize, oh, I don't like this.
Mhm,
I need to either I need to kind of live with it, or I need to speak up. And
mhm.
I realized then at that point that I wasn't someone who could just live with the disrespect. So then I learned to speak up. How should what is your opinion on that? And like, how should people speak up when when they are disrespected, or when they feel unheard in meetings, or when they are interrupted by other people? Because sometimes I've experienced this more than I wish. But and and I've struggled to say, and I mean, now I say directly, like, hey, I'm still talking, let me finish, right? But that takes some,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, like it takes
It
some.
takes a while to get there. Yeah, I mean, yeah, for the longest time, and I'm sure a lot of us have had this. You'll say something, a couple of minutes later, it circles around, and some guy says it, and it's an idea that people pick up. And you're like, I just said that. What did you not hear? Is my voice so quiet?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's yeah. I find generally, I'm somebody who I like to understand the why of what we're doing. I like to understand the context, and I like to hear from a lot of other people to get different perspectives so that we really get to an optimum solution. There are many people, I think, certainly who gravitate towards leadership roles who are quite strong personalities, who want to get to the punchline very quickly. Um, and it doesn't always leave room for us finding the optimum solution. And that can be quite challenging. It is really difficult to get over those kinds of personalities, particularly when they're senior to you. I have had instances in the past where, with a peer, it's easier to do, but I've had to say, I haven't finished. I'd appreciate the courtesy of allowing me to finish because I have this to say. And they're kind of, oh, God, you know. I've also had occasions where I've had to go to somebody senior to me and say, you know what? 70% of communication is listening, and I really don't feel that you're listening to me or the other people in the room. So can we work on that? And I think they were kind of taken aback. I can't just keep doing this. I'm hitting my head against a brick wall, and something's got to give. And I was not going to say anything publicly in front of other people, but it needed to be handled. And things did change. On a couple of occasions, you know, a few months in, I'd have to kind of remind him a little bit, but it made for a better result across the team. It wasn't just about me and him. It was about having everybody contribute and having this fairly strong personality sort of just back down a little bit and create some space.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so spot on. You know, another question I had about my own personality and the experience that came with it, which is, I consider myself to be a little bit of an empathetic person where I think where I put other people, well, at least at par with me or even sometimes before me. Um, Whether it's my family, friends, and then by extension, people who I work closely in my career with. And sometimes, my empathy becomes the reason for my inability to speak up
Hmm.
because I start then thinking, oh, if I speak up, then I'll be hurting the other person, or like, you know what I mean? Like you start thinking, maybe I shouldn't say it too directly, or oh, maybe you should like, find some, fluffier way to say it. But then you don't actually want to say it like that. But then you're like, oh my God, but I also don't want to hurt the other person.
Mm.
How should we think about empathy but using it as a strength and not weakness, as a weakness in this in this context where yeah, you want to think about, be cognizant about other people's feelings, but you also want to be cognizant of yours.
Yeah, it's really tricky. I think being empathetic is a gift. It can also be a hindrance for sure. I think using empathy to take that one-on-one time with somebody and to acknowledge the challenges that they're having, maybe acknowledge and hear them out as they maybe vent a bit and talk about what's going on. And then try and reframe maybe the way they're thinking about things. Have you thought about it from this perspective? Or perhaps we could get some input from this subject matter expert or something. I mean, it sounds so sort of calculated, doesn't it? But you do have to think about who's hearing this message and how are they hearing it. People probably don't take away anything like as much as we actually say to them. Sometimes you have to say things two or three times in different ways. But I think hearing them out, empathizing with their situation, understanding the problem, and then reframing perhaps how we might approach it together. Sometimes you might just have to say, you know what, we've kind of tried all these different things and this isn't working and we need to get from A to B. So come on, let's get it
Yeah,
done. That's not an easy
right.
conversation to have, but sometimes it just needs to happen.
And should people fear any, because also again, some of this can be cultural, like for example in Indian culture, right? Like we are trained to believe that there's going to be a negative, some sort of consequence or retaliatory behavior if
Mm,
you speak up for yourself. So like, oh, just try to like kind of let it go or push it down, and you kind of just keep going. And
mm,
then of course it only works for so long, and then after that you have to like really think about how you want to be, because again, and like I'm trying to, through this podcast, I'm trying to help people who are in their 20s think like leaders, because
mhm,
my true belief is that you don't have to actually have a title of a leader to be a leader, because you can lead in any shape or form at any age. None of those things matter, right? And so in that context of being able to lead, if you don't speak up for yourself, if you don't actually, there's something my manager also said, like, hey, if someone's interrupting you, just you should call them out, and like in a nice way, but do it. And
mm.
because if you want to be a leader, if you want to be in an executive position tomorrow, you have to be able to do these things, because that's what separates someone, a leader, from, well, not one, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there are several people that I've worked with over the years, or even just in social situations too, that you know they have that natural ability to bring people with them. And it's not because they have a title or a formal authorization, as it were, authority perhaps. It's because they just have that kind of that charismatic energy that you want to be able to deliver something great for them. And that's such a gift. I love working with people like that, whether they're in a leadership position or not. They just have that kind of gravitas and that confidence, and they want to involve people and they can build a team. And that's amazing. That's an absolute gift. I do think that the cultural piece of should I speak up? Should I be heard? Should I challenge? That's very real. I have some colleagues who I work with who I'll ask their opinion, and it's really like pulling teeth sometimes. And I'm honestly asking them because I really value their opinion. And I have to say to them, I really want to hear what you have to say. I don't know. And I think that you've got some great ideas. So please share it with me. Not every manager or leader is going to be like that with their staff. I wish that people were, that they would really look around and see the talent and expertise that they have amongst their team and draw people out of their shell, because it's not an easy thing to overcome.
Right. So then, what do you think good leadership in today's age should look like, in your opinion?
I think simplifying a complex problem, getting the essential issues percolated to the top, dropping the noise, bringing in subject matter experts, and really being prepared to listen and learn, but not doing that ad infinitum. You have to get to a point where, okay, we've all understood the goal, we've understood the why, we've understood the risks and the costs and the time and what might be a reversible decision so we can kind of go with it, or an irreversible decision, so let's really get this a bit more rigorous. At some point, you have to set a clear direction, and you have to probably reiterate that numerous times. You have to be consistent. But I think you also, along the way, as milestones are reached, you have to really give people recognition. You have to celebrate wins. And I think when there are failures and problems, I don't think there's ever one person or one issue that might be the cause of it. I think there'll be numerous contributing factors that we all need to learn from and kind of dissect a little bit and figure out, okay, we can move on or we need to redo, but we're going to learn from this and do something differently next time. I think
Absolutely.
that's probably the big thing. Simplifying something complex, getting all the inputs, setting a strategic direction, and being consistent.
Absolutely. Is it, of course, there's still not enough women leaders, at the top, right? So is it different slash difficult still to be a minority? And the reason I'm asking this is because I don't know if this is cultural or not. And again, the perception could come from a cultural place too, my perception. But sometimes women are considered emotional, not empathetic. That and it can and a lot of people then are afraid to be empathetic because they would think or other people would perceive them to be not strong or not assertive or not, coming across a certain way, right? And all of those things. And even a couple of comments that I've had in my own life where I've literally had multiple people, Claire, tell me like as a joke, as a just passing comment, like, oh, if a woman is flying a plane, if I knew that the captain is a female, then I'm gonna just get out of there, like as a joke, and to me, like, so am I supposed to laugh? My question is coming from that place where I see women growing, but I also feel sad for how sometimes they are perceived. And you being in those scenarios in real time, what is it like to be women in leadership today?
That's interesting. So I've worked in media in one way or another for most of my career in sales and in marketing roles. And it's such a relationship based, it's certainly in the B2B, it's such a relationship based business that actually it's been a benefit to a certain level. When you get to the point that you're doing a bit more of the sort of, reporting up the board type stuff and less of the working with the clients or with the distributors, or that can become more challenging. I think for a lot of women in leadership positions. I think though, whatever you're doing, you have to be able to prove your worth by being consistent in delivering. When there's a problem, owning it and doing something about it. And there's nothing that's particularly biased towards women there or emotional, empathetic people. I think that's the expectation in work today. I do think a positive thing, I think for women and particularly empaths, if you like, women or men, I think as we're looking at more automation, as we're looking at more AI, as we're looking at technology to do so much of the work for us, there's always going to be an element that is very human. right? It's about understanding the need, it's about understanding the why, it's about understanding the context. I think actually that's where those empathetic people really come into their own. That's enormously valuable. It's not just a transaction. The goal is actually much more about the experience. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there for women in senior leadership roles.
I couldn't have said it better than you did. And thank you for switching gears for us. I was actually going to go into AI as one of the next topics. Yeah, you're right. Like, I think, you know, if at all there was a point in time where empathy and emotional intelligence was not seen as a strength, now it is more than ever, as you said,
Hmm.
right? Because of the cognitive abundance that AI gives us. So
Hmm.
we don't need, well, we need more people who are good decision makers, who have strong judgment, who have strong instincts, who have strong sense of direction. For example, even I was trying to build a demo for something, and I used this tool called Kiro, which is an AWS, like an open source web-based tool. Like you can just basically type in a prompt, and it's going to create the entire web page for you. You don't have to be developer, nothing. You just have to give the prompt. But, the first time I gave it a prompt, I assumed that it would just like know what's in my mind in terms of the direction of how I wanted it to go, and what was the desired output from the web page. I assumed that it would infer it from the prompt that I gave it. But then I realized after it delivered the output was accurate according to the prompt because it followed exactly what the prompt asked it to do, right? It didn't have any more context, which was in my head, which I assumed that it would, but it was in my head, right? So then the second time I updated my prompt and I added very specific directions of like the business impact and like the outcome, what I wanted, and the flow of the UI, how it should flow, because those things are not logical, they're directional, right? And so you're right. Like I think the sense of judgment, what you think should be the next business idea, what do you think should be the next strategy, and I think that's going to become really important. And I think for that, now actually I've been researching, or I've been like every morning I wake up and I start looking at some like tech trends and like business trends and stuff, because I think now everyone needs to become more equipped with that information so that they can propose the next big innovative idea, right? Because AI is going to do the actual execution of the idea. You don't need to know the execution of it as much.
Yeah, I think you've got to have more vision. I worked for somebody some years ago for a short while, and he was such an entrepreneur. And somebody described him once as someone who could see around corners. I thought, yeah, that's what people need. It's this instinct and intuition about, what is the next big thing going to be? What do people really want to connect with? What's really going to touch them that they're going to have some loyalty towards, that they're going to be excited by? That takes, some real imagineering, I guess.
Absolutely. And I think it also takes someone who can be very connected to themselves, because then you're able to actually bring in your own lives, your worldview, your maybe your life experiences, how they shaped you into the product and into the strategy, right? Because like, I guess switching gears a little bit into the aviation side of things, I grew up in Saudi Arabia and Dubai, and the perception of like flying in the Middle East is very different than the perception of flying in North America. Like culturally, it's considered like if you get into an aircraft in the Middle East, for one, because obviously oil prices are cheaper, so the airlines make it look everything, even the economy feels very premium. Everything is just premium, right? And you get meals served even for like a 1 hour flight. You'll get a meal served. Whereas in North America, even if it's 6 hours, it's like it's treated like a bus, right? It's like, oh, you just sit and then you're just like starving. There's pretty much no service, right? So yeah, and then because of that, I kind of used that experience of me living in the Middle East and then in India and then in North America. So I had that kind of comparison to shape my strategy around connected aircraft and what would be the level of momentum in Asia, in Middle East for more passenger experiences as compared to North America and Europe as well, right? There's going to be like a different level of how much people need something and how fast is ROI going to come out of it for airlines and all the
Yeah, it's very, very different from one region to the next. It's interesting. I think technology is delivering so much now, but it doesn't necessarily mean that because we can do it, we should do it. Right? Um, those brand loyalty touches, the experience that we want to bring, where it's much more part of differentiating the service. And I think that's always been part of the rich experience in those regions that you mentioned in Asia and in the Middle East. And in some cabin classes in the US and in North America, but generally speaking, not so much. Yeah, it's very different from one region to the next for sure.
Absolutely. So what I know you've been working on in the connected aircraft space for so many years. What do you see is going to be, and what do you think is going to be the general future of passenger experience, and like what is something that's going to be fun for people who are watching this to like experience, a couple of years down the line when they sit in an aircraft so they can remember you and be like, oh yeah, this is what Claire said is gonna was gonna happen.
So I think, the technology is there, the bandwidth is there to be able to stream pretty much any service that you might want. You could have an at-home experience now. The rights, however, from the copyright owner perspective, are not necessarily quite so clear, so there's a challenge there to overcome. But the other part of it is that an airline really want to give over all of that real estate, just turn on the tap, make bandwidth available, and have people have that at-home experience? Or do they want to build brand loyalty by really super serving them, understanding them? And so I think personalization in the context of streaming content is going to be really important. I think that's going to become really critical, particularly for your loyal customers, your frequent flyers. Personalization will be key. I think leveraging AI, but not just for the sake of AI. So using AI to help you filter through all of the content that'll be available. There is already a lot of content on board airlines, even when it's just cached on a server. But once you're streaming over, these OTT streamers will be able to get over huge bandwidth really now. I think then you need to be able to manage discoverability in a much more efficient way. I think AI will probably get us there. So the combination of the AI tools and just how much data we have about the passenger, subject to privacy laws, etc., how much the airline is able to share and leverage by using AI against the context of all this incoming media, I think that's going to be really important.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, like, basically extending the living room experiences and bringing it kind of into the aircraft, right, in some shape or form. Is it
Yeah,
going
I
to
think
be, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think on board people behave very differently. So, yeah, 30,000 feet, you've already been through a few hours of getting to the airport, getting through the airport, going through security. You're probably a little bit tense and anxious. You're wondering about whether you'll get there on time. You're thinking about your business meetings. There's a very different atmosphere for the average passenger. And so they're looking to do different things, to be distracted by different things. They're looking at the types of content that actually they might not pay to go to the movie theatre to see, but they're kind of curious about. Or they might not have a particular streaming service, but they want to experiment a bit with that. But ultimately, they probably want to get on board and feel that their airline knows them. I know you love to sit down with a really good, cool, cold, crisp rosé. Let's get that served to you within the first 20 minutes. And here are your favorite shows. Oh, and last time you flew, this is what you watched. Would you like to carry on? That would make me really feel that I'm looked after. And I think that's the experience that a lot of airlines are aiming at, for sure.
I see. So, would it mean that people will end up being able to watch whatever OTT platform they've already been subscribed to on the ground in the aircraft, or will it be an aircraft specific experience, but within the context of that experience, they would be able to continue watching what they watched from a previous flight?
So I think in the near term, it's going to be more a matter of a subset of content that would come from an OTT streamer, mainly because of the rights issues, whether the rights to send something to an aircraft are restricted because it's a public performance, or whether it's because of a geographic location or an IP address or something. There are quite a few hurdles to get over. So I think there'll be a subset of offers. And I suspect some of the OTT streamers will use that as a hook to build their subscription base. So you'd be able to continue when you get on the ground. You might be able to subscribe for, free period of time or a reduced rate at some point. There might be some revenue share opportunities with airlines. I think that will happen. I have no doubt that at some point those rights issues will be resolved and people will be able to access the full gamut of what they've subscribed to with some of the OTT streamers at least. I could imagine that in the future an OTT streamer might say, for an additional $10 a month or something, we'll give you some roaming rights and you can watch this anywhere, including your own aircraft. But that's going to require a lot of negotiation with the producers, the directors, the copyright holders, the content owners, because streamers don't own everything that they have obviously on their service.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah. And so, I mean, if you look back at connected aircraft from probably, I mean, I entered that space probably in 2018, 2019. And even at that time, Claire, there wasn't like the conversation about leveraging satellite connectivity for aircraft for these types of use cases, more real-time streaming, also streaming of cockpit and other cabin components, data, having that data accessed in more real time, and all of that. That was still, as what I recall to be, it was a very preliminary discussion. So meant that there wasn't, well, there were people like yourself and me and others in the space who were experts or not, well, who had strong gut instincts about where this industry is going to go. But there wasn't necessarily enough data. It was more of, well, these are some trends we're seeing, and I guess as leaders, that's our job, right? Is to predict what the future would be like so that we can work backwards from that to design that future. So in a scenario where you don't have enough data to make a decision, how should we look at the risk that can come from having enough some data but not having enough, but also having to move fast with the limited amount of data that you have? And I mean, that's a challenge that I myself have come across so many times, where I'll have some customer data but I won't have how much I want. But I also feel like if we wait too long, we will compromise on the speed aspect of it. So, how should we look at it, Claire, when you have those
It's a real
scenarios?
quandary, isn't it? I think, every customer, not just in this sector, but every area that I've worked in, people want to be the first. They want to innovate. They want to, attract more customers, their end users, and they want to do something that's going to be noteworthy and take their brand forward. And yet, people don't really want to take the risk, particularly when it's a heavy lift in terms of investment, equipment, hardware. So it's a real challenge in the absence of data. So many decisions now are data driven, and it's really important that we have as much as we can. I think probably relatively small scale trials to gain that data and insight. But that's also a challenge, because when you're looking at something that's quite cutting edge, you have to really socialize it so that users know that it's there and what they can do with it. So that you get a decent enough take up that you can really make some judgments. And when you're socializing something that actually is only available to a small proportion of your market, it can actually lead to disappointment for those people who don't get to travel on that aircraft or work with that service or go to that hotel chain. It's a really tricky one. I don't know that there are any easy answers to that.
Right. I just wanted to have that conversation going, about how do we, and I think that's a very hard question, and there's no good answers, because like sometimes you just don't have enough data and you have to still, as a leader, make decisions, because you also be judged for not making decisions, right? And yeah, so you want to make decisions, but I think one thing that I've been trying to do is kind of document why I made the decision and with how much data did I make that decision, and come up with some sort of like a contingency plan. Like if things didn't go as I had anticipated, then here's the sort of backup or contingency plan for how we kind of scale back or come up with something else. And I try to like make the decision itself somewhat flexible or moldable. It's been a challenge for me because sometimes you just don't find enough data. You just don't. And the more innovative the idea is, the more you don't find enough data, because
Yeah.
clearly if the idea is so far like sort of innovative and so far out in that sense, it implies that the market is not there yet and mostly nobody's thinking about it yet. And
Or
so
maybe they did think about it and there was a good reason why they didn't go for it. That's also a concern, right?
true,
I think
yeah.
you've always got to have the metrics have got to be agreed. What is the goal? What's the measure of success? And if we don't meet that measure, what's the exit strategy? I think sometimes that is just, well, we'll kind of see how it goes and then we'll figure it out if we fail. But you really got to have an elegant exit strategy if that's what you need.
Yeah, that makes sense. What should that generally look like? What kind of questions should one address in that, sort of exit strategy or backup plan, generally speaking?
I think really you have to really manage expectations to have all of the stakeholders, including the customer, understand, this is the goal, this is the measure of success, and these would be the next steps if it goes ahead. These would be the next steps if it doesn't. I think the worst thing would be having a vague measure that perhaps not everybody is aligned with, and then you end up with a very expensive experiment that has no end in sight.
I think you said it really well, having a vague measure, because then it's not tangible enough that there can be collective ownership. on that. Yeah, that makes sense. Just I think this is the our last topic, kind of catering to the early career segment of people. So people who are in still studying in school and in undergrad, masters, or they just joined the workforce, or they're looking to like they're in their 20s, but they're like struggling with different challenges of like how to speak up in meetings or how to feel respected, just some of these very basic challenges that people might be facing. And so from keeping that audience in mind, what would be your advice to, or pieces of advice to those people who are watching?
I think at the start of your career, you really want to build a solid foundation, good understanding of your job, a good understanding of the broader industry that you're working in. You want to start establishing your reputation as somebody who can deliver. You will start then, as you go through the ranks and have more years of experience, to really focus on building the relationships and building influence. Then you'll get to a point where you're able to work in a less tactical way and in a more strategic way. But you have to earn that respect. You have to earn your place. And that's by delivering at a tactical level. That's by understanding the broader context and being able to join the dots. And that's by really leveraging the empathy that I think so many probably of your viewers will have, to reach out to people, understand their challenges, work together to overcome constraints. I think that's probably the biggest thing. And I think to just remember always, leadership is not a title. Leadership is an ability, it's a skill. And I think, generally speaking, most younger people underestimate just how powerful they are. Particularly when you're working in a B2B environment, you have an end consumer that you're already thinking about. Most people, in one way or another, are a consumer of that product or that service. They will have a very valid perspective. And I think you speak up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was amazing. I think I wish I heard this when I was 25, but it's never too late, I guess, right? So, with that, I have something special for us.
Okay.
It's a rapid fire round. Claire, are you ready for this?
I'm ready. Let's see. I'll give it a go.
So yeah, feel free to elaborate a little bit if you need to, but it's mostly supposed to be a fun thing for our audience to get to know you a little bit more better, in this way. Sound
Okay.
good? Okay, awesome. So let's get started. What's one leadership trait you value the most in people?
Honesty.
Good one.
Even with bad news, honesty.
And I see. So yeah, okay. Even with bad news, honesty, because you want people to know that you can actually handle bad news.
Yeah, and if people aren't going to be transparent about some of the things that might not be going as well as perhaps they should, how are we going to course correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, confidence or competence, which matters more?
Okay, so confidence will get you in the room. Competence will keep you in the room and have people listen to you. So they kind of
Very,
work
very,
hand in hand, but I
yeah,
probably would say competence over anything else.
yeah, confidence first, yeah. Because yeah, you're right, yeah. Okay, this is a good one. Okay, worst career advice you've ever received.
Worst career advice I've ever received. Good grief.
You
Well,
don't have to tell their
I
name,
think,
just the advice.
yeah, I don't know that I've ever had a really terrible advice, actually.
Or at least something you may even have heard in general, other people talking about it, and you think, ah, I don't agree with
Well,
that.
whether it's about work or anything else, one of the things that will always have me dig my heels in and prove them wrong is when somebody says you can't do that. Like, oh, hell no. This tiger is coming out. This is going to happen. Yeah.
You're like, oh, if you told me I can't do it, that's exactly how I'm gonna do it now. Wait and watch me, right? Yeah, I know what you mean. Okay, one habit that changed your career.
Uh, I think actually probably thinking more about the work-life balance and understanding what's really important. Yeah, is it important in the next 5 minutes? Is it important in the next 5 months? Is it important in the next 5 years? That really helps you like just get a little bit of sanity and a bit of breathing space to all these things that are going to be bombarding you day to day.
Absolutely, yeah, I completely agree. I call it the 30,000 feet view, and you called it this. I completely agree. I just think, like, if I zoom out of it, I would just see like Earth as a big rock or something. I would feel so. It's called something like it's a theory of insignificance or something, where by realizing how insignificant you really are in the grand scheme of things, you realize your problems are also just as insignificant, if not more.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I sometimes think, we can get very kind of stressed out about things, and sometimes rightfully so. But at the end of the day, we're not brain surgeons, so let's just take a breath.
Absolutely. Okay. A red flag you notice in meetings slash in people.
When somebody's not really engaged or paying attention, and they might look like they're taking notes or something, maybe they are, but, if they're not participating in the conversation or even kind of looking stunned at something amazing that somebody said, or just like, "Come on, switch the lights on. You're not here for ornament. Like, come on."
I know what you mean. I feel really like I actually get annoyed if people are, sometimes people are like looking somewhere else and like, dude, I'm sitting right here. Like, like give some basic respect to the person who's sitting. Yeah, anyway, yeah, I completely agree with that. Okay, this is something we touched on just earlier, but here we go. Gut instinct or data.
I'm more of a gut instinct
I
person.
knew
That's
it.
probably to a fault, really. I mean, the data is important, but I do trust my gut. I've learned in the past that when I don't, I'm usually wrong.
You know what? I'm the same way. Like there, yes, as you said, there's data, but I feel like our gut kind of stores all of the combination of various things, and so it's able to tell you something before your brain is even able to comprehend it. So completely agree with that. Okay, this is a question I picked intentionally to ask you as someone who's a successful, career-driven woman in leadership. You ready for this?
Drum roll.
You're
Okay,
like,
let's go.
You're like, am I? Okay, okay. Should women be financially independent?
Yes. Yeah, I think always because you have an element of choice, right? I think you need to be completely unencumbered when it comes to making decisions about your personal life or your career and you only really get that by having that degree of power, if you like. It's not a competition, but I think that yeah, having that independence is really important.
Absolutely. The reason I asked this question, Claire, is because I know I'm just going to explain this a little bit, is because I've seen so many people like leave their jobs after they got married and then they're like, or they themselves think that their career is secondary compared to like their partners or their husbands. And it really upsets me. And I really want to make a statement, not just coming from me, but even coming from you and others like you, that yeah, it is important. It's not about how much you make, but it's about the fact that you can stand on your own feet and that you are contributing to society in your own way, however big
Mm.
or small, because that also creates a sense of sort of your own identity. And you start
That's
to,
true, but
yeah.
I have friends who um, worked maybe part time or gave up work when they had children. And I think that was a family decision that was right for them. And the skills that they learned as domestic engineers, frankly, managing a budget, doing timelines, managing kids and all these different demands are such useful skills in the workplace. They,
Mm,
in later years, have gone back into a professional environment and they've had so much to contribute
I
because
see.
they have really learned to multitask. I mean, the energy that many of these people have, whether it's stay at home mums or stay at home dads, I mean, there's always something that people are learning and growing from.
I see. Were they able to easily get back into the industry after years of not of parenting and all that?
It was probably at a different level than they would have been, of course, if they had carried on, but I think it was the right work-life balance for them, and I think that they have been able to prove themselves very easily once they've got into
Hmm,
that position.
gotcha. Great. Awesome. Next question is tough conversations. Avoid and let go or address immediately.
If it's in a professional environment with somebody that you rely on, I think you really need to just nip it in the bud and deal with it in a constructive way, in a non-confrontational way. If it's a personal thing, sometimes I just kind of, blah, blah, yakety schnackety, whatever, I kind of don't care. But generally speaking, if there's a behavior or a lack somewhere in terms of contributing or whatever, I think you need to have that conversation early.
Mm,
Then it's helpful to somebody rather than let some resentment build up and then they're stunned. But why am I getting this feedback now?
absolutely. That makes sense. Okay. Risk or stability?
I'm probably quite adventurous. I have taken a few risks. Yeah, I probably have. I don't know. When you're younger, it's much easier to take the risks. And then you get to a point you're like, yeah, kind of thinking about my end goals and where I want to be. And, you get a bit more careful about things. Yeah. A little bit of both.
Both. Gotcha. Okay. Do you think women are still evaluated differently than men at senior levels in general?
In general, I think probably they are. We talked about empathy, the emotional side of things, sometimes perceived as a weakness. I think increasingly it's going to be seen as a strength to bring that human element to so much automation. But yeah, I think they are. I work currently and have worked in the past with some amazing engineers and software developers and absolute brainiacs. And I would love to see more of those women get to more senior positions.
Absolutely. Okay, have you ever had to adjust how you show up in a room to be taken seriously?
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. I think, think about the context, who you're with, their expectations. And it's also a cultural thing as you go from one region to the next, have an understanding of what's acceptable and what's expected.
Yeah, or hierarchy, like structures, things like that.
Yeah.
Is there a behavior that's seen as strong leadership, in quotes, in men, but too much in women?
Being outspoken, being direct. Yeah, that can be something that is, yeah, it's seen differently from
Mm,
women for sure.
okay. So, yeah, okay. You know what? I've seen this too. Yeah. Like, so you mean if a woman is assertive, then it's considered that she's mean or rude, right?
It can be sometimes, not always. I've worked with some really great teams and not had that experience. But yeah, some of the more old school, sometimes it can be a little bit. And I think probably my personality is I tend to be quite direct. I can be a bit tactless, so I have to kind of put myself in check a little bit not to do that. But that's not because I think as a woman they'll see me as emotional. It's just because well, maybe that kind of wasn't actually quite acceptable.
That makes sense. Okay. Should women be liked or respected first?
That's a tricky one, isn't it? I think in order to get on, I think respected. But in order to bring a team together and to be able to pull on those experts and insights, I think it's both at that point. You might respect somebody because they're so good at what they do, but they might be a nightmare to work with or very dictatorial. You're not going to want to be there at 1 o'clock in the morning helping them figure out the latest problem. Whereas it's someone that you both respect and like, you're probably going to go the extra mile.
Yeah, absolutely. So what actually gets someone promoted? Is it performance or perception?
But I personally think it's performance, but I have worked with some people who are very good at managing up, like kind of, this is what I've done and just sending out those messages. And I both admire and resent them. I admire them because, good for them. They've kind of got the right results. They're getting ahead. They're getting the recognition. I also think I'm just not that kind of person. I haven't been good at that in the past, and it's been to my detriment. It's just how I was built, I suppose. But in all honesty, nobody should really just expect their boss or anybody around them to be looking around to see who's doing what. They expect that you're doing your work. And if you want some additional recognition and opportunities to move up, then go and knock on their door and tell them, this interests me, this motivates me, I'm energized by this. What are these opportunities? Because guess what? They're too busy doing their own job.
Exactly. And they're also busy thinking about themselves too, right? Like they have things to think about too. Yeah, makes sense. Okay. What's one of the biggest insecurities in women that keep them from going after what they want?
That's an interesting one. I think there's a lack of self belief, unfounded, generally speaking. But I think that that is something that a lot of people, this imposter syndrome, I think a lot of people suffer with. I think women do particularly. I think probably particularly in, kind of sciences and technology and so on, that's been a little bit of harder work, I think, for those folks to break through. Yeah, it can be a little bit of a boys' club in some places. Just the kind of after work kind of, oh, let's all go for a beer or go play golf or whatever. Okay, you kind of need to divorce what's going on at work from that. I did have a situation actually where in a different company, our CFO came over and took a bunch of the guys, including my peers, out for golf and didn't ask me if I played golf, didn't invite me to go, didn't even say come and meet us for lunch or whatever. And I said to him, next time you're in town, bring your fluffy bathrobe because we're going to a spa. If it's important that you're mixing with your VPs, guess what? I'm one of those, so let's do something about that.
Right, absolutely. You know what this reminds me of like the fact that sometimes in team meetings, right, like if you're the only women or you're like in a minority position and everyone else is men, they're mostly like kind of broing out, whatever you want to call it, and like kind of like talking this very informal like bro tone, and then like the minute like you say something, it's a very different, so it's like sometimes you feel like there's like some sort of natural advantage that you're
There's a
not
little
able to
bit of
tap.
code. There's a little bit of code sometimes. Yeah, that
Yeah,
doesn't happen
yeah,
often these days, thank goodness. But usually I just tease them about it. And
yeah, same. And like sometimes like, they'll start talking about like some superhero movie or something that may be more, male centric. And so then I'll just kind of jump in and like, yeah, by the way, also how did you guys ever watch Gossip Girl? Or some like
I remember saying to there were some guys actually doing that kind of, growing out, as you said, and I just interrupted and went, "Oh, I'm sorry, my head's full of kittens and cookery," and they were just like, "Oh shit."
Right. Yeah. No, and I actually, jokingly, not jokingly, but I kind of brought it up with my manager in a subtle way, and he was really nice, and he was like, "Oh, yeah, actually, I didn't even realize that. You know what?" So then from the next meeting onwards, meeting, he would kind of be like, "Oh, Priyanka, what about you? What movies did you watch?" And like, kind of kind of talk about what I was interested in, which even if it didn't relate to everyone else, also he knew that I'm not like into sports and I'm not into, so he would try to kind of refrain from too many of those topics because he'd be like, okay, like, look, Priyanka is getting bored. Let's talk about something else, guys. He kind of like bring it up in a funny way. And then eventually everyone kind of understood that, yeah, we should talk about something that Priyanka can also be involved in. Because I was mostly the only woman in almost every team that in 9 years, almost.
Wow, yeah, that's hard.
Yeah.
Well, good for him for being more inclusive and kind of getting the message and making
Yeah.
sure that
Yeah.
gets across to the others. Good.
Yeah. So, okay, next question is, okay, if someone's doing great work, but they're not getting promoted, what do you think they might be missing?
So we talked a bit earlier about whether or not somebody's actually saying, "Hey, this is what I've achieved. Look at what I've done." I think there are a lot of unsung heroes. They don't necessarily keep track necessarily of how they're performing against metrics or KPIs. Maybe they don't even have metrics or KPIs. But I think if somebody can say, "Okay, this is where I am today. By doing all of these different things, this is how I'm moving the needle," and then take that to their boss to say, "Hey, did you realize this is the improvement that's been made on time delivery or accuracy or whatever?" I think that's really important. It doesn't come naturally to a lot of
Mm,
people to kind of, sing their own praises or whatever. But I think it's important to say, I'm not just here doing the day to day, I'm moving the needle. Things are better than when I took them over, and this is how I've done it, and these are my plans to take that forward even further. Yeah, you have to kind of be prepared to speak up a little bit.
yeah, and I think this ties back to the confidence piece you mentioned earlier. Like it comes from having some confidence in yourself that, hey, you know what? I think I'm really good at this, and I've done this, so I'm going to talk about it. So, I know we addressed this question, but I'm still just going to ask: should women fear being empathetic leaders at work?
No, and I think increasingly not. I think it's a skill that is underrated, and I think it's really coming into its own. That human element amongst all of this technology and automation and AI, I think it's hugely important. And yeah, be proud of that as a gift.
Absolutely. What do you wish you could tell all men in the world?
But, um, um, the biggest thing, as I said before, is about, communication. 70% of communication is listening. I've been in so many meetings, and women do this too, where they're on broadcast and no one's actually on receive. Well, then what are we going to do with that? How are we going to get to an optimum solution and actually find some actions that we can take forward to deliver what we need to? We've got to have a balance, and everybody needs to be able to make space for that to happen. So
Absolutely.
yeah, that the communication thing would be probably the most
Communication.
important
Absolutely.
thing.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I think even in my personal life, I'm like teaching my partner how to communicate well. It's like, and I think, I don't know if women have it more natural where they're able to communicate their emotions in a much more empathetic way and like more in a more clear sense. But yeah, that makes sense. Are we truly making progress for women in leadership, or are we just talking about it more?
I think there's progress. I think I see progress. Yeah, I think we've got some where I am right now working for Rave, I think we've got some really strong women in leadership positions. Yeah, I think there's definitely progress there in the B2B environment where we really need to understand more about, the long-term aspects of, what's going to make us successful or not, the human element of things. I think there's definitely progress. It has some way to
Absolutely.
go, but we're getting there.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. What's something about corporate environments that early career individuals are not prepared for?
So my first job was with a large corporation. I worked for the BBC for 7 years or so, and I loved it. But I needed to kind of stretch my wings and find out more about myself. So I went to work for some different types of companies. Typically, I kind of went from one of my customers to another. They kind of poached me and took me in. And that was really interesting. I learned a lot about myself. But I honestly, I would say to my 20 something self,
Right.
don't look a gift horse in the mouth, because this is a pretty amazing opportunity. There are tons of things that you could do, so many people that you could learn from. The structure, yes, sometimes it's a bit of red tape, but actually you're going to learn a lot from having some pretty robust processes. Appreciate it, because there are going to be plenty of companies that you work for in which there are no processes.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
I
be
think people
grateful.
make the good things about large corporations.
So are you saying to be grateful for what you opportunities you get
Yeah,
and
to be grateful for those opportunities, to learn from such a wealth of expertise there, and also just really take note of the processes and workflows that are working and why, so that you can take those forward to other opportunities in the future. You kind of follow the rules and do things the way people always have, and you don't really question it. And it's only when you get to an organization that doesn't have that that you appreciate it.
I see. And then if you took note of those things and those become part of your skills, what you know and what you can bring, right, to some other company.
Mm, yeah.
We're almost at the end. Do women feel afraid to be direct and give feedback?
Not this woman, and I don't think that woman either. No, I don't know. I don't think so.
Have you ever felt afraid to, like, in your life, like to give feedback and be kind of direct as opposed to like kind of, well, I guess it's not even a
Not
question for you, but it's more like if they do feel that way, I guess how should they deal with that feeling of feeling afraid to give feedback to?
So I
Yeah.
think it's been a long time since I felt intimidated about it, but I do remember one of the first times. I'd applied for a job, I didn't get it, and I wanted to get some feedback. And I was nervous about asking for the feedback, not just about what I would hear, but I really wanted to explore and learn from that so that I could get that opportunity next time it came up. And I really prepared a lot for it. I did some role play. I kind of went through, if this, then that. If they ask these questions, if I have those answers, where could this go? And I did a role play with one of my friends. And,
Mm,
it helped me just kind of think through how this might go. And I went into that meeting feeling like I had much more control than if I
mm,
just said, "Oh, can I have a half-hour appointment?" and not really thought too much about it. I really prepared for it.
interesting. Okay. Have you seen Uh, or what would you do if one person's opinion was valued while the while yours was ignored? What would you do or slash what are people supposed to do?
I think I'd probably have to understand the evidence for it, the data behind it, why that seems to fit what we need more so than my view.
No, but like if it is more if the behavior is more dismissive than it is, yeah,
Yeah, sometimes you just got to choose the hill you want to die on, haven't you? Other times you need to kind of stick up for yourself and go back and question it again. But I've learned over the years that there are some things that you just let go and some things you dig your heels in.
right. So keeping a balance between those things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I completely agree with that. Okay. Lastly, this is your last question. So you're like, oh my God, almost done. This is an easy one. This is just a chilled out question. I want to ask this to every woman who comes on my podcast, right? What is it like to be a woman today, Claire?
I think actually in so many ways it is amazing. I feel, we talked about independence. Um, I feel like I've achieved professional, personal, financial independence. I can make choices. I don't need to ask anyone's permission. I feel empowered. It's exciting. It's exciting. At the same time, I sometimes think, have I become so independent that I don't need to lean on anybody? And would it be difficult for me to lean on somebody? Yeah, let's not underestimate how important that aspect of human relationships is too. But no,
Interdependence. Yeah.
generally it's an exciting time. Yeah.
Absolutely. I feel the same way. I feel like it's an exciting time to be a woman, and especially because there's so many women who are speaking up for others and who are trailblazing to create paths for the ones that are walking behind them, right? With that, I did have a favor to ask you before we conclude. I always tell people, to kind of share with people that you like or respect or love something that you like about them, because, life is so busy that we are not able to sometimes prioritize just telling someone what you liked about them, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes even something as simple as that can make someone's day. So I want to make your day.
Lovely. Okay.
And yeah, so let's share one thing that we think is good about each other. So I'll go first, okay? So Claire, love that you are so your energy is so easy to be around, and you always have, every time I've seen you, you're having a smile on your face. And I'm sure it's not just accidental that you have a smile. Like, you're intentional, you're trying to make other people around you feel good, feel welcome. And every time I've been around you, I've always like felt like I want to like tag along more. And that's the quality of a wonderful person and a great leader. And that's why I wanted to do this podcast with you. That's why I mean, forget the podcast, but I wanted to, when I reached out to you, a few months back, I was like missing you because, I was missing what I remembered from the last conference we met at last year was just your vibe. It was so infectious that I couldn't like not want to be connected to that again. So I just want to say like thank you for making me feel so comfortable. I remember even when I came to the office, and and how you took me to dinner, and how you're such an amazing time. And because I think like, those are the things that actually make my day. Those are the things that actually carry me during times when sometimes you don't feel your best, right? I just want to say thank you for being such an amazing person to me, and an amazing friend, and just such a casual, caring person. And I think it's very rare to come across people like you. So I just wanted to say
Oh,
that thank you so
thank
much for
you.
that.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. That has made my day. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
So, let's see. There are so many things I admire about you. Mainly, you have such drive and such conviction. I think doing this podcast, and you're really establishing a brand, but not in a kind of a slap a label on it kind of a way. I think you're really establishing a persona that people want to listen to, feel inspired by, feel motivated by, feel they can turn to. Yeah, I think it's absolutely wonderful that you're doing this. And
thank you.
thank you
Thank you
for
so much.
reaching out to me.
Of course. Thank you so much, Claire, for doing this. And yeah, through this podcast, I want to normalize what it's like to explore different conversation or topics that are unexplored, for people to even like talk to someone like you, because, I don't want to be someone who's just all talk and no action, right? And so when I tell people, hey, reach out to this person and that person, like, how can I reach out? And I'm sure they might think I'm bullshitting too, right? So here's me not doing that, right? So
Excellent.
and so I want to normalize, the different talking about different topics. And that's why even I talked a little bit about even women and how they feel, because as a woman, I feel like it's a personal responsibility to stand up for those who can't, and speak up for those who can't, and maybe answer questions on behalf of those who don't have the voice to ask them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's important. Something that if we can all give back in that way, I think that's a
Absolutely. Any other last words you want to share before we conclude our episode today?
no, just say, thank you again for this. And I would say to all of your listeners and viewers, go girls, you got this.
Absolutely. All right, Claire, I'll let you go. Thank you so much once again. Hopefully, we'll see you again on another episode, if there's demand for something else. But until then, have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.